Today's video is about the best underrated story-rich open-world games out there. These are the hidden gems that might not always get the spotlight they deserve, but offer some of the most immersive, engaging stories in the genre. If you love exploring vast worlds and diving into deep narratives, these games are definitely worth checking out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. So without wasting more time, let's get into the video. When Mad Max was released in 2015, it was up against some major heavy hitters in the open-world genre, such as Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain and Fallout 4. These games had huge followings and massive marketing budgets, making it hard for Mad Max to get the attention it deserved. This timing left it overshadowed despite being a solid title on its own. Plus, the game didn't receive the kind of aggressive marketing or promotion that other big-budget open-world titles had, and people were expecting more of a story-driven experience tied directly to the films. The reason Mad Max stands out is its immersive gameplay. The car combat is intense, the exploration is fun, and the whole scavenging and survival vibe really nails the Mad Max experience. The hand-to-hand combat system is super satisfying. The way you can chain together punches, counter enemies, and use brutal finishing moves feels so smooth and impactful. But some people wrote it off as repetitive. Sure, if you only focus on the missions, it might feel that way. But if you dive into the world and experiment with everything, it's awesome. In the end, I think that Mad Max had all the ingredients to be a standout title. If you haven't played it, you're missing out on one of the best hidden gems out there. The gameplay of LA Noire is completely unique. Unlike most open-world games that focus on action and chaos, LA Noire takes a slower, more thoughtful approach. The biggest issue of LA Noire was also that a lot of people thought they were getting another GTA or Red Dead Redemption, but LA Noire wasn't about high-speed chases or shootouts. It's a slow-burn detective game that focuses on solving crimes, interrogating suspects, and piecing together evidence. The game used revolutionary motion capture technology to bring characters to life. Their facial expressions are so realistic, and it actually plays into the interrogations. You have to read their faces to figure out if they're lying. That's something no other game was doing at the time. Some players found it frustrating, and maybe it wasn't perfect, but you can't deny how groundbreaking it was. The 1940s Los Angeles setting is gorgeous, but it's more of a backdrop than a fully interactive world. You can explore, but there's not a ton to do outside of the main story. For a lot of people, that made the city feel a little empty compared to Rockstar's other games. But the attention to detail in recreating that period is absolutely unmatched. The story itself is amazing, but once you've played through it, there's not much reason to come back. And I think that hurt its staying power. People moved on pretty quickly after finishing it. LA Noire might not have been for everyone, but for those who get it, it's unforgettable. It might have been ahead of its time, but it absolutely deserves its place as an underrated classic. Far Cry Primal takes you way back to the Stone Age. Instead of the usual modern-day or futuristic stuff we get in most open-world games, you're in a world full of mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and ancient tribes. It's a completely different vibe, and it makes the whole game feel fresh and unique. It's not your typical Far Cry experience, but that's exactly what makes it stand out. And let me tell you that the lack of guns is actually a good thing in this game. No assault rifle system, no machine guns, just primitive weapons like spears, bows, and clubs. And you know what? It makes you play totally differently. You can't just run and gun your way through it. You've got to be smart, stealthy, and think on your feet. It's a totally different pace, and honestly, it makes the game feel way more tense and satisfying. One of the coolest parts of Primal is the ability to tame animals. You can have a wolf, a jaguar, or even a saber-toothed tiger help you out. It's pretty wild. You can send them into battle, use them to track enemies, or just have them by your side as you explore. It's like having your own little squad of wild animals helping you out, and it adds a whole new layer to the game. If you haven't played Far Cry Primal yet, I highly recommend giving it a shot. It's not your typical Far Cry experience, but that's exactly why it's worth it. You won't regret it. A lot of people didn't really get what this game was trying to do. Most folks expect it to be a gritty crime drama or just an action-packed brawler, but Yakuza 0 has this weird mix of serious storytelling with hilarious, bizarre side stories and minigames. And I can get that if you're not familiar with the series, that balance between serious drama and goofy fun can throw you off, so some people don't really know what to make of it. Also, Yakuza 0 is a prequel to the Yakuza game series. Therefore, Yakuza 0 is the perfect starting point. You don't need any prior knowledge of the series, and it's a fresh start that brings you right into the action. There's a lot going on though. Between the story, side quests, minigames, and all the random stuff you can do, it can feel like a lot. Some players might have been overwhelmed by it, thinking it was too much to do everything. But that's a part of the charm of this game, and every bit of it adds to the experience. And also, the combat system of this game is so fun. You've got multiple fighting styles for both Kiryu and Majima. You can switch between them mid-fight for some seriously intense combos and the heat moves. It's one of those games where even the fighting feels like part of the story, not just a way to pass the time. Yakuza 0 is one of those rare games that blends heartfelt storytelling, intense action, and a world full of bizarre but fun distractions. It might not have been as hyped when it came out, but it's definitely a game that deserves way more love. You might have heard of it, or maybe it flew under your radar, but trust me, this game deserves way more love. Vampyr might seem like just another action RPG with vampires, but it's so much more than that. One of the biggest strengths of Vampyr is its storytelling. The game is set in post-World War I London during the Spanish flu outbreak, and you play as Dr. Jonathan Reed, who's just turned into a vampire. Now, what's interesting about this is that he's a doctor, and he's basically trying to balance his oath to save lives with the fact that he needs to drink blood to survive. Every character you meet has their own backstory, and you get to decide if you want to help them or turn them into a snack. And your choices have a big impact on the world. If you feed on certain people, you'll get stronger, but it could lead to chaos in the city. The game does a great job of making you question your actions, and that moral complexity is what makes it stand out. The combat system is another reason why Vampyr is underrated. It's not as polished as some of the bigger RPG titles out there, but it's still fun. You've got a mix of weapons and blood-based abilities that add a nice strategic element to the fights. It's not the focus of the game, but it works well enough to keep things engaging. Vampyr came out at a time when there were tons of other big games in the spotlight. The marketing wasn't super strong, and it got overshadowed by some of the bigger names in the industry. So, a lot of people missed out on it. But if you give it a chance, you'll see there's a lot more to this game than meets the eye. The Saboteur is one of those games that didn't get nearly as much love as it should have. It's set in Nazi-occupied France during World War II, which is already a unique backdrop for an open-world game. The game blends historical events with a cool artistic style. The thing I really loved about it was how it uses color. In the Nazi-occupied areas, everything's black and white with a little bit of red. But as you take back the city, color starts to return. The gameplay of the Saboteur is a mix of stealth, combat, and exploration. You're doing things like sabotaging enemy operations, climbing famous landmarks, and sneaking around in a Nazi disguise to infiltrate enemy lines. Now, it came out in 2009, which is a year full of heavy hitters like Assassin's Creed 2 and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. On top of that, the game didn't really get the marketing push it needed. And then, Pandemic Studios shut down shortly after it launched. So, the game didn't get the support it deserved. But honestly, even with all those bumps, the Saboteur was ahead of its time. The gameplay was fresh and fun, and the story and atmosphere were something we hadn't really seen before. The whole idea of bringing color back to a world that's been taken over by Nazis is absolutely awesome. At the end of the day, it's one of those games that doesn't get enough credit. It's got a lot of heart, and it's a lot of fun if you're into exploring a unique, dangerous world where your actions actually make a difference. If you missed it, you should definitely check it out. Shadow of the Colossus is such a masterpiece, but it still doesn't get the attention it truly deserves. Let's talk about why it's so underrated. First off, the gameplay is super minimalistic but so profound. There are no side quests, no bustling cities, and no endless dialogues. Just you, your horse, and 16 massive colossi to take down. You play as Wander, who is a young man whose goal is to resurrect a girl named Mono, and to do that, you have to defeat these giant creatures. But here's the kicker. Are you the good guy, or are you the bad guy? The game doesn't tell you outright. It's up to you to figure that out. Each Colossus feels like a living, breathing part of this world, and taking them down is not just a victory. Sometimes you feel guilty like you're disrupting something sacred. When it first came out on the PS2, it was ahead of its time. It pushed the hardware to its absolute limits, which was impressive, but it came with some performance issues like frame rate drops. Honestly, I think that turned a few people off back then. There aren't any standard enemies. Every fight is with a giant Colossus, and each one is like a puzzle you have to figure out. It's not about button mashing or grinding. It's about strategy and precision. That's brilliant. But back when it came out, it was so different from other games that some people didn't get it. This game didn't blow up like some of Sony's other exclusives. But for the people who get it, it's unforgettable. Shadow of the Colossus isn't for everyone, but if you give it a shot, you will definitely stick with it. The original Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, released in 2012, had all the potential to be a huge hit. It got great reviews for its combat and world building, but for some reason, it never really took off. Part of that was because its developer 38 Studios was facing financial issues at the time, and the studio shut down shortly after. So many people never got the chance to experience it, and that kind of held the game back. Fast forward to Re-Reckoning, which is the remaster, and while it improved the graphics and made some gameplay tweaks, it still didn't blow anyone away. The game takes place in Amalur, which is a huge, gorgeous fantasy world with tons of lore created by R.A. Saboteur. And honestly, the visuals in this game are super underrated. It doesn't go for that hyper-realistic look like a lot of modern AAA games, but instead, it has this colorful, stylized art style that makes the world feel alive and timeless. Every area looks like it could have been pulled straight out of a painting, and that's something extraordinary. The game has some serious strengths too. The combat system is fast, fluid, and fun. You can mix melee, magic, and ranged attacks in a way that feels smooth and satisfying. It's the kind of combat system that's easy to jump into, but takes a bit to master, which is why it really stands out. And let's not forget about the replayability. The game gives you so many options for customizing your character. The Destiny system allows you to mix and match abilities to create the playstyle that works for you. There's always something new to try, plus tons of side quests will keep you busy for hours. So the game has plenty of content to keep you coming back. Days Gone is one of those games that didn't get the recognition it deserved when it came out. When it first launched, it got hit with mixed reviews, mainly because of bugs, frame rate issues, and long load times. But most of those problems were fixed pretty quickly, so the game runs way smoother now. It also didn't help that it was compared to big-name Sony exclusives like The Last of Us and Horizon Zero Dawn. Those are huge names, and Days Gone just couldn't match up to their narrative depth or technical polish at launch. Because of that, a lot of people dismissed it early on. The game also has a slow start. The story and mechanics take a bit to get going, which can be a turnoff for some players. But as you progress, it really pulls you in, especially with its emotional story of Deacon St. John, who's trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. Also, the market was already flooded with zombie games when Days Gone came out. By 2019, there were so many other post-apocalyptic zombie-themed games that they got lost in the crowd, even though it brought some really cool ideas to the table. The thing is, Days Gone actually built up a solid fan base. Unfortunately, Sony never greenlit a sequel, so Days Gone remains an underrated gem that's slowly getting the credit it deserves. Sleeping Dogs wasn't even supposed to exist as we know it. Originally, it was part of the True Crime series, but that got cancelled. Then Square Enix came in, saved it, and turned it into Sleeping Dogs. By the time it was finally released in 2012, there wasn't much hype around it, and it had to compete with big hitters like Far Cry 3 and Assassin's Creed 3. And let's be real, people judged it unfairly. Everyone compared it to Grand Theft Auto, expecting it to be a chaotic sandbox game. But Sleeping Dogs isn't a GTA clone. It stands on its own, focusing on martial arts combat and a gripping undercover cop story set in a totally unique setting. The hand-to-hand combat system is fluid and brutal. It's like Batman Arkham, but with a martial arts twist. You can counter, grapple, and even use the environment to smash enemies into fish tanks or shove them into spinning fans. It is way more fun than it has any right to be, with high-speed chases that feel like you're in an action movie. But the problem is that there was no sequel. Even though it got great reviews and had a dedicated fan base, its studio decided to shut it down. Without a follow-up or continued marketing, the game faded into the background. Even the definitive edition in 2014 didn't get much love. It looked better and came with all the DLC, but it came out during a time when remasters like The Last of Us were stealing the spotlight. It never had a chance to grab a new audience. So, those are just a few of the most underrated story-rich open-world games that definitely deserve more attention. If you've played any of these, or have your own hidden gems to recommend, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to give this video a like if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.